Hi, Julie. As a reminder, please have your video camera on if possible when the meeting starts.
Still on for our hearing in 2 weeks, the hearing we have coming up?
I think so.
PUC,
Is that
Yes.
still on?
yes.
Yeah.
We
Good.
already, the legal already went out on Sunday. And we will have the packet to y'all on Wednesday.
Perfect. I'm scheduling things around it, assuming that it would stay on time, but you never
Yes.
know.
No, we have nothing else for that one.
Good.
Because we had to make sure PSC can join us.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna start the recording.
Wait. Wait 1 minute. But I did want to wrap. I wanted to wrap it.
That seems like a noble and justifiable cause.
I agree. Why not?
Right.
It makes life fun.
Okay. Good evening. The April 10th, 2025 Whatcom County Planning Commission meeting is called to order. I'll call the roll. Well, if you're here, Kelvin Barton, that's me, I'm here. Fred Brown,
Yep.
Daniel Dunn says he's not gonna be here. Anita Eisenberg says she's not going to be here. Nicholas Street.
Here.
Jim Hansen, do we have Jim Hansen? Jim Hansen. Julie Jefferson,
Here.
Dominic Masseri,
Here.
Scott Van Dalen.
Here.
Right, please join me for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hello, Jim. All right. Chair up here for you.
Yeah, right.
You have Commissioner?
You even have a name tag. What do you know?
There you go.
Thank you so much. Scott.
Bet.
So, it's time for department update. And go ahead, give us the update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things, for you commissioners. Councils will have a public hearing, next Tuesday, on the home-based business regulations update. And they are continuing the conversation on, and deliberations on countywide planning policies. And I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. Commissioner Brown had, sent an email with some questions just on comp plan, process and timing and stuff, so I hope you guys, understood, that response. We are tentatively looking at bringing the, draft climate element, which is that brand new element, to the comp plan, required by House Bill 1181. It is currently in review by the Climate Impact Advisory Committee, and I don't know, Lauren Clemens, who is the climate manager, works in the Public Works Department, and Lauren is guiding that process, leading that, facilitating that process with the committee. And so, don't know for sure if she's gonna have final recommendations from the committee, to forward to you guys, but we are tentatively plugging in May 8th and May 22nd. So both of your meetings in May, because that's a brand new element and it'll all be new, to both have deliberations, first a work session on the 8th and then continued deliberations and public hearing 22nd. And then the other elements will follow incrementally over the course of the summer as we wrap those up with being reviewed by different departments and by different advisory committees. Jim, you had a question?
You're reading my mind. Actually, I have a comment because I did read the letter and I thought that was very instructive. But one thought it provoked in me is that we've been spending, the consultants have been spending a lot of time on the public input process, but largely the public input has been given by interest groups, various committees and caucuses representing interests. And somewhere in your letter, you indicated that when we finally get these documents, that it would be appreciated if we would expedite the review. And I guess my response is I've been waiting for these for a long time, and we and the council are the only two bodies who actually represent the public and the greater public good. So I want to give you advance notice that we may need a lot of time to review these things. Hopefully they'll be so great, they won't be torn apart very much, but I am concerned because each of these interest groups has their own needs and perspectives, and it's going to be quite a job to harmonize those for the greater public good.
Yep, thank you for the comment. And this, I don't know if I mentioned this in that email or not, but this update cycle, everyone is different, all right? There's different issues and different procedures because of the changes in state law over the course of the years since the last update. But council has appointed several new advisory committees since the last update, and they made a very big point with us during the public participation plan to make sure that we did outreach to those advisory committees on all sorts of folks have different expertise in those committees, and so not always do they align, and so that's staff's job is to sort of filter those comments and then bring forward a staff recommended version for you guys. But that has taken made the process longer this time than it has in the past, for sure. The other thing I would mention is that we are working with a consultant and pushing to hopefully publish the draft EIS by the end of this month. So hopefully by April 30th, we'll get a draft out. You guys can start to get that.
If there keeps being delays for us to see it because it's getting held up with other committees, I'm personally not opposed to seeing the current chapters as is, us doing at least an initial cursory review, not doing a final vote on it, but then once we get those recommendations, we can incorporate those in, just because then we're hopefully speeding that process up, kind of dual looking at the same time.
Yeah, thanks. We gave the committees and the departments deadlines to get those comments into us, and I think we've gotten most all of them. I think there's a committee or two, just one or two left that we're expected to get next week, by the end of next week. So then I think that'll sort of, once that whole process is done, then staff can start to compile those and get you guys some recommendations. And some elements will be more difficult to go through than others. All right, so some won't have that many comments, and others will have a lot of comments by a lot of different people. So we'll have to filter all that stuff through. But yeah, our thought was to help you guys in your review is to go through element by element. We can have a hearing on it, and then you don't need to necessarily take action on each element. But we would just, okay, next meeting we'll have the next element, have a work session, have a public hearing on that. You don't need to make a decision. And then at the end of the process, have a big public hearing on all of it, right, so the whole problem. And you guys can make your deliberations or decisions along the way if you want, or if you want to wait, and you can do that. We want to be as flexible as we can.
So a couple comes up. Why would we do the EIS before the final document? Because isn't the EIS an analysis of what the final comprehensive plan is?
Yeah, well, so there's two. There's the draft EIS, and then there will be a final EIS.
Okay.
The draft EIS contains 3 or 4 alternatives. different growth alternatives, different assumptions about a variety of things. Growth projections being kind of the prime in terms of population employment growth, but also the distribution of that growth. And different mitigation measures will be discussed. The final EIS, the process is that you publish the draft, we'll have a public hearing on it. And people will have time to submit written comments. And then the final EIS identifies the preferred alternative or a preferred alternative, as well as responds to the comments on the draft EIS. So that will happen several months after the issuance of the draft.
Well, the draft can only cover, say, the population projections and anything related to that phase, but it can't cover the discussions, let's say, we pick the forestry section. Right, so if there's been no discussion on the forestry section yet, we can't have a draft EIS on.
Right. The policy language, the idea behind the EIS or through SEPA in particular, State Environmental Policy Act, from which EIS has come from, is to define sort of the bookends, right? The preferred alternative, so we have a wide range of alternatives, growth and impacts. Policy language can change inside of those. And the preferred alternative doesn't even necessarily have to be what the final growth projections or the growth maps or the UGA boundaries are going to be. It just have to be within those broad sideboards, or those, we refer to them as bookends. So the policy stuff, unless there's some major changes in policy that are going to have a significant adverse environmental impact, are going to be addressed or assumed to not be significant in terms of from a SEPA standpoint. Does that make sense?
Somewhat.
Yeah.
The
You probably won't see it. I'll just add I think it's chapter 2 is the land use element where all the UGA, the individual UGA and population allocations and all of that is. Those you probably won't see until the end.
When?
Until the end of, we go through our elements, just because that's the most complex one, and the cities, well, we're talking, all of the city councils and the city planning commissions are doing the same thing with their comp plans, right? And we have to be, under the law, coordinated and consistent, all of us, all 7 cities plus the county. So we monitor that and make sure that we're staying sort of coordinated and consistent as we go through the process.
And then from a process perspective, the only thing I wonder was if we have a hearing on a subject, on a chapter, I'd actually rather see us have the heavy discussion and the votes and so forth at that time while it's still fresh in our minds, rather than waiting 3 months and saying, what did that guy say about forestry? And
Yeah, sure.
so,
Absolutely.
Did the council approve one of the growth and distribution options? And is that what's going to be reviewed for the EIS?
As I said, I think there's 4 EIS alternatives, from basically no action, which is no additional growth beyond what's already allocated in the current comp plan, to the high growth scenario that picks a high number. And alternative 2 was sort of the de facto request of the cities and the county. So you think that ultimately, unless things change significantly, that becomes the preferred alternative or some variation of it as we move forward. The council did adopt the non-binding multi-jurisdictional resolution that allocated preliminary growth targets to all the cities and the county. So that's the sort of the de facto planning numbers that the cities and the county are moving forward with to help prepare their capital improvement plans and make sure that adequate urban services can be provided to serve that growth. But that number can change too in the end. As long as it's within the bookend, again, the bookends of what the range is considered in the draft EIS. Councils can ultimately pick any number in between.
All right, any more questions for Director Bersonius? Right, let's move on to open session for public comment. Eileen, Planning Commission Coordinator, take over, please.
Yes. Welcome to the meeting. This meeting is being broadcast live. The audio is being recorded and will be posted to the county website. As noted on our website, members of the public may watch the meeting or join online or by phone. During the open public comment session, speakers may not speak to items that are scheduled on the agenda for a public hearing tonight. We have one, is the open space application. If you would like to provide public comment at this time, we will take comments from those in the room first. Would you like to provide public comment? Okay. Seeing no one else in the room wishes to speak, we also have no attendees online.
Okay. Thank you, Eileen. Time now for commissioner comments. Any commissioner comments? Seeing none, let's move on to approval of minutes for the March 13th, 2025 meeting.
Second.
If we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes, are there any additions or corrections? Seeing that there are no additions or corrections, Eileen, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Brown,
Yes.
Greif,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Jefferson,
Yes.
Mosseri,
Yes.
Van Dalen,
Yes.
Barton,
Yes.
passes.
Okay, so we have one open space public hearing and meeting. I'm not sure which one's doing the presentation. Go ahead
Great,
and introduce yourself for us.
sure. So my name is Alex Harris. I'm joined by Lauren Templeton. The two of us run the Conservation Easement Program. That's our main focus. We also run the Open Space Program that is administered by PDS. So that's what we'll be talking to you about. We have an application that I'll go over quickly. I'll give you a little bit of context. And we are also joined by Christine Larson with the Assessor's Office. So if you have any questions about how the Assessor's Office wields the formula and the number we give them and how that then impacts taxes, she can have more to say about that. So with that, I can just move things forward here. So a little bit of background on open space. I'll do this quickly and feel free to just interrupt me and ask questions if you have any, but I'm assuming most of you know about this. The 1970 Open Space Taxation Act was passed over concern of conversion of resource lands, ag and forestry lands, shorelines, wetlands, scenic vistas, historical sites, and recreational opportunities. The act was a way of allowing property owners to have their lands valued at their current use instead of their highest and best use. So generally, the assessor's office assesses value by the highest and best use. Generally, that's residential value and taxes people accordingly. Well, this is a way of taxing people at their current use, say if they're actively harvesting timber or if they're farming. There's a reduced property tax opportunity for those landowners who are engaging in one of these programs. And the idea is that this is an incentive for landowners to continue managing for those open space values. The idea is that there are public benefits associated with farmland, forest land, other kinds of open space. And so those landowners should get a tax reduction as a result. That's the general idea. People conflate all these different kinds of open space all the time. So I put this chart together. I hope this helps you understand the different kinds. Designated forest land, what people call DFL, that's for working forest land. And you have to be commercially logging your property, or at least have a forest management plan that shows that you will commercially harvest. So large tracts of the county are enrolled in DFL. Open space ag, which is actually open space farm and agricultural land. Oftentimes that's called OSAG. And OSAG is for commercial farming. There's certain thresholds that the assessor's office uses to determine whether or not a property is being commercially farmed. Those are the two that are most prevalent. The third one is administered not by the assessor's office, but by PDS. And that's what we're talking about tonight. I like to call this public benefit open space. Unfortunately, it's just called open space land, which is not the most, it can cause some confusion. So open space land uses the public benefit rating system, which I'll explain more in a sec, to determine what level of public benefit is being delivered in its current use, and therefore what level of tax benefit a property should enjoy. Subset of open space land is open space farm and agricultural conservation land, which is a nice little acronym, OSFAC. This is essentially commercial farmland that is historically has been farmed, but is now fallow and not farmed. And the idea is that it someday could be commercially farmed again, but is not currently in that state. So that is actually administered by our program, and public access is required under both of these programs that we administer here at PDS, except in certain instances where council gets to waive that public access requirement. So essentially, here's a map showing the distribution of those different categories. DFL is in the dark green, OSAG is in this light green, and these little red dots around the county, those are the ones we're talking about tonight. Those are open space land, or OSFAC, the open space land, open space farm and agriculture conservation land. Is this going all right, or should I slow down, or can I keep on going? Okay.
It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Well, I'll just have to say that we've had presentations on this many times and you're doing an excellent job.
Thanks. It's kind of a confusing program, so I'm trying to make it as simple as possible.
And that's before we get to the PBRS scoring.
Here we go. Yeah, this is the fun part. So PBRS, essentially RCW lays out that counties have to come up with their own PBRS, public benefit rating system. And that's a way of calculating the public benefit that is being delivered to the general public. And so we actually have a 1995 ordinance that council passed that clarified exactly how PDS is meant to administer this. And it hasn't changed substantially since that time. So 30 years ago, a lot of these are things that are still very much make a lot of sense. Some of them probably could use a dusting off and an update. But we administer it as it exists now. And we go through each of these criteria. Most of them are yes or no. And you do a map review. We also do a site visit. So we get to answer some of these questions by being there on the ground, asking the landowner, getting more information. And then it pumps out a score at the end. Here's a little bit more on the process. So PDS staff, we receive applications, we conduct the site visit, we do the public benefit rating system score. We provide a recommendation to the planning commission. That's what we're doing tonight. Then the planning commission, you guys get to review this and approve in whole, in part, or deny applications. That then goes to the county council. They also will review and approve in whole, in part, or deny applications. And based on what council does, the assessor's office will make adjustments accordingly. The assessor's office is also in charge of reviewing different tax agreements over time as they're doing their regular assessments. They will say the property changes hands. They'll make sure that the new landowner knows this is enrolled in open space. Here are the rules associated with that. We are I think the granting agency is the terminology. Does that sound right? The assessor's office is in charge of tax compliance. Is that the right terminology? Christine might be able to weigh into that, but yeah, there's two departments that work together on administering.
I think that's right.
It's drain the swamp.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the process. Public benefit rating system, essentially, you need a 45 or more to get approval from PDS. We generally just go through the PBRS. If it pumps out over 45, we give a recommendation. If it's under 45, we recommend not approval. The planning commission can still decide to do whatever you decide to do.
Why did 45 get set as the number?
This is like a line to 100 points in total. Have you seen the formula?
I don't know. I wasn't around 30 years ago to check this out. It's
You
Just a
were
kid.
probably around at all.
Yeah.
So,
Just a little bit, just a
If
wee
it's
one.
45 out of, what's the actual possible total? Cause like it's not 45 out of 100, right? It's 45 out of something. I'm actually
isn't
not
it
sure.
70 and 45 out of 70?
I don't know.
I've seen 70 earlier.
We've done these before and gone through it, so.
It'd be interesting to just rank everything the highest and
The
see.
max, yeah, it says the max score is 70, but the actual score here was 30 of that 70 before it goes through the public benefit rating formula, which that then gets it to 48.1 full 28, but I'm not sure what the theoretical max is with the formula.
Yeah.
So,
The whole thing is like, it's like inches versus metric system. It's like, okay, sure, we did it this way.
So I have a question for you, because you said if it's 45 or above, you recommend it, and if it's below that, you not recommend it. Do you recommend against it, or do you give no recommendation?
I think it's recommend no approval.
Yep, I think it's recommend against it,
Yeah.
so we,
Okay, because I'm probably the old timer on here, and I think I'm one in my ninth year, close.
Ooh.
And I've never had it said, we don't recommend, I've always had it told to us, we give no recommendation.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm not trying to correct you.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's good to know though. It's good to think about
Also,
the difference between those two.
I didn't
Yeah.
remember it that way. I thought we had some that were not
Yeah, I
recommended
thought that
Yeah,
I
we could-
had them
a couple years ago.
recommend,
or
recommend,
2
not
months
to
ago.
recommend.
But not recommending is, an absence of any recommendation.
Philosopher.
And recommending against it is a recommend of no.
Right. I think the criteria that council approved says 45 or higher. Just warrants a PDS approval, I think it's something like
Yeah.
that. So,
The bottom of the form here says must receive at least 45 points for staff recommendation of approval.
There you go.
If that is derived from the code, which I haven't read this particular part of the code, would imply that you could still not recommend something over 45, but that it has to at least get to 45 to get a recommendation. At least that's what that one
Okay.
sentence.
yeah,
The good news is, you do this every 6 months, and we only have one, and you're above 45, so you can work that out between now and.
yeah.
yeah, there we go. We can do that.
Commissioner Hanson, go ahead.
This is just a point of information that, around the topic of, it being approved 30 years ago, that there's a recommendation, I believe, coming out from the Forest Resilience Task Force, that the rating be amended to give greater weight to forested parcels based solely on them being forested and not other, scientific attributes.
Interesting.
Also, I think for when we presented in January, or I think last November, actually, I think our staff recommendation was approve to deny to,
I think
is
so.
how we went about it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the
That is correct.
correct way, but yeah, our staff recommendation was grouped all together.
Commissioner Masseri.
Since we're recalling it differently, it'd be very easy to go back to those old packets if they're easily recorded somewhere and just see what was on there.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we can do that and, just a spoiler alert.
It's, all I'm doing is and maybe I'm remembering it wrong, I just looking for consistency,
Yeah, that's good.
and so.
Well, tonight is a recommendation for approval. And so that answers that. That'll be an easier one for at least this question. But between now and the next one, which will be 6 months from now, we will answer that question and no by the next time. Yeah. So, something I always like to highlight is public access is required according to county policy on these open space land parcels. Council may waive this requirement if there is documented habitat for threatened or endangered species or listed sensitive species, or if there's known archaeological sites, or if there's a delineated wetland that has certain ecological value. So that is council's discretion to do that. Otherwise, public access is generally required.
Commissioner Hanson.
Does, cultural and spiritual site as indicated by a native nation include Is that included as an archaeological site, even though there might not be professors involved?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. If,
I don't know the exact requirement of what an archaeological site is, but it has to be within the county's database for it, so there's very few staff that have access to that information. It's normally pretty protected.
And that's an interesting question because the native nations keep that data close. They don't want it in the county database because they don't want people finding out. So they ask for review of projects, which they can veto without specifying exactly what or where is in it. I mean, neither here nor there, but I just wanted to bring that up. It might have future relevance.
And this isn't based on, there's no additional like archaeological survey
Yeah,
done,
exactly.
yeah,
yeah, it's an interesting question. Though.
yeah.
All right, let me keep on going. So tonight, there's just one application. RCW specifies that we do this every 6 months. So whatever applications we received in 6 months, we bring before you guys and it goes through that process. This is the Lewis application. It was actually received in late 2024. It's an application that was initiated when the assessor's office identified this parcel had been enrolled in open space ag, but it was not being commercially farmed. And so this landowner was being kicked out of OSAG, and there was a possibility the landowner would actually have to pay back taxes, 7 years back taxes, and a penalty for being enrolled in this tax reduction program inaccurately. There are 3 parcels totaling just over 5 acres. It's located within the city limits of Sumas. I'll show you some maps in a second. And it received a PDRS score of 48.18. Therefore, being over 45, we recommend approval.
How come if it was in the farm and ag designation, why is it going to OSL and not to the open space farm and ag conservation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So originally, the landowner intended to apply for OSFAC. But it turned out the property had never been commercially farmed.
Whoa.
And was erroneously enrolled for decades. And so that became apparent when I went out to the site and asked the landowner about the history of farming on the site, because I couldn't believe that agriculture had ever taken place there. And she's like, yeah, we've never farmed this. So with that information, we then determined OSL was the right designation, given its ecological value, which I'll go over quickly. And it did reduce her score, but still over that threshold of 45. Yeah, it's a good question. I keep on going. So a few maps to give you some context. Here's the property in red. There's a development that has taken place in the last, I think, 10 years. She told us just up the hill. And the Canadian border is actually at the top of this slide. So you can see that this is within city limits of Sumas. There's an industrial area to the south, and it's huge areas of impervious surface that a part of that must have been in the past. There's a conservation area, mitigation conservation area that's just south of the road there, and some really, high value wetlands. To the north of the road where her property is, there's also some wetlands with a lot of horsetail, skunk cabbage, willows, lots of these species that you generally see in wetlands. So while she doesn't have delineation to show that, great blue herons, ribbon blackbirds, all sorts of ducks and waterfowl, very wet property. I'll show you some photos as well in a minute. Here's a few maps. The one on the left shows the zoning. So yellow is Sumas city limits. You can see some ag designation, some ag zoning in the far left of that left map. The map on the right, that checkered polygon there is peat soils that are mapped, not ground truthed, but those are mapped peat soils, and you can see the subject property there highlighted in red. Zooming in a little bit, a few more maps. The 100-year floodplain is that map on the left, and you can see that at least the majority of the property is in the 100-year floodplain. And sure enough, the November 2021 event did hit the property. There is a mobile home in the southwest corner of the property and a barn workshop area, and the workshop was impacted by the flood. The map on the right shows habitat conservation areas. There aren't actually any. But then once again, you can see where those peat soils are and some of the rivers and streams that are mapped on the property. Here's some photos of the property. Reed canary grass, blackberries are definitely taking over big parts of the property, but there's some nice forest in the back. Standing water all over the place, and those species I mentioned. Public access would be kind of hard in this location for at least a big chunk of the year. But for the rest of the year, the landowner is very open to posting a sign on that road and allowing public access and being pretty open to different kinds of public access. Beaver activity, you can get the idea of what kind of property this is. It's a wet one. This was an apple tree that got mowed down by a beaver. So that is the presentation on the Lewis property. And yeah, love to hear any questions.
What's the zoning of it?
It's in the city limits of Sumas. I think it's in the report, actually.
And something else, I'm not sure if we mentioned that if this gets approved by council, we will then have pass it off to the city of Sumas, and they have to go through the same approval process.
It just says zoning city of Sumas, but it's probably a relatively high density then for.
Oh, there it goes. Zoning designation in the city of Sumas is residential low density. Which I don't know enough about their
Would that be a lot?
zoning.
It
You know,
might be similar to the development right above the property.
Probably higher than R5 though.
Oh,
yeah, I would imagine.
If it's urban, typically low density is like 4 units an acre. Quarter acre lots.
Which, yeah, makes sense.
Now, with enrollment in OSL prevent future development? Is it like a conservation easement where it stays the land it's forever? Or this is just
No,
you
good
enroll and
question.
you unenroll whenever you want, and then you could just go develop at that time?
It's considered a lien on the property, so if they wanted to remove themselves from the program, they'd have to pay those 7 years of back taxes. So there's just a financial component. I mean, it's so wet, I think it'd be pretty pricey to put some sort of
You could
residential
see
development
that,
there,
that would
yeah.
be, especially with.
Yeah, I'm supportive of this, but I'm just curious. Are there parts of this property that are actually developable, given the wetlands?
So you can kind of see the trees in the back there are actually a part of this property. And they're very steep. That's like the steeper part of the property.
Okay.
And then everything else is this low floodplain. I didn't actually walk back there. I had muck boots and even still it was too deep of water for me to walk around. And so I haven't gotten a good sense of that, but like Lauren mentioned, it is pretty wet and encumbered with wetlands and would be pretty difficult to develop, I would imagine.
You said the property been enrolled erroneously in the farmland program. Could you expand on what you mean by erroneously?
Yeah, maybe that's my own assessment of what it is. It was enrolled, even though without it being commercially farmed, it probably shouldn't have been. And the assessor's office only has certain tools to assess compliance with that requirement. I'm not sure if Christine, you want to weigh into that question of how you assess commercial agriculture OSAG designation and maybe where this property fit in to that.
Yeah, so this one, it was in the revaluation area last year. And so when the appraiser went out to do that revaluation, they reported back to me that they didn't notice any farming activity happening on the land. So I reached out to Ms. Lewis and she stated basically what she told Alex that, hey, oh, I've never farmed it. I think I had horses once, but they were starting to drown and get stuck in the muck. So So I gave her the options that, you can either remove it or you can apply to reclassify. When there is a sale or transfer, I'm not sure when they purchased this. It goes back further than our records go. But at this point, we currently ask them to fill out a form letting us know what their intended agricultural use is. And a parcel this size would be required to earn income from that agricultural use. So it's very unlikely that this one could ever go back to agriculture. And that's what the primary goal of the OSFAC program is that's the only program you can go back to open space farm and ag. If for the open space land, if you ever want out of that, if you wanted to go back to farming, you would have to pay to remove and then reapply to the farm and ag. But for the OSFAC, you could just reapply without having to pay the removal. That makes sense.
I just want to stick up for the long retired staff and council or commissioners that identified that as open space farming, is that because there's no trees there, somebody cleared it for agriculture, and it might have been 100 years ago or 150 years ago. So, and the hydrology changes when they put in roads and what kind of drainage they have with the roads and drainage ditches being plugged up. So I think it probably was agricultural at some point.
Yeah, it looks like it went into the program in the 70s, which is the majority of parcels in the county went in that time.
I believe the beaver took down the last commercial.
Yeah, last chance of selling an apple.
That actually does line up with the landowner's anecdotal narrative that when this subdivision was installed, there's stormwater infrastructure that has emptied onto her property. And she claims that it was a night and day. Suddenly the property became way more wet and she wasn't even able to mow that field anymore.
Right.
And then she just gave up on it.
Right.
But they used to mow it and I think you're right. If it was cleared, it was probably farmed at some point. So hydrology probably changed over time.
The Washington State law of stormwater is referred to as the common enemy.
Well, pass it on to your neighbors.
That's actually illegal.
So that's all we got. Let us know if there's any other questions. Otherwise,
We should make a motion.
I think it's pretty clear, yeah.
Go ahead.
I had a question or a comment, not a motion. I'll wait till there's a motion on the floor, which is probably appropriate for my comment anyways.
Mr. Chair, you do need to hold a public hearing, correct?
Oh, thank you. All right. Eileen, would you take over?
Yes.
Thank you.
As a reminder, for public hearing, as a reminder, those who wish to speak can only speak on this topic. Anyone in the room wish to speak on this topic? Would you like to speak on this topic? No? Seeing no one in the room nor online. Commissioner
All
Chair?
right, we'll close the public hearing.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the motion. I have a comment. I do not intend to make the motion.
Move approval.
We have a motion to approve.
I'll second.
And we have a motion and a second discussion.
So,
Commissioner Bright, go ahead.
So I guess the question in front of us is, as I see it, is kind of twofold. One is, for this particular piece of land, do we think that it is open space value that we want to enroll? Protect seems hard to argue if they can unenroll and develop it, so I don't know that I want to use the word protect the land. That's like piece one. Piece two is, as representatives of the county and the citizens within it, and in this case, the citizens of the city of Sumas, do we believe that enrolling this property in this program is worth the tax cost to the other taxpayers of Sumas, right? And the tax cost to the payers of Sumas is about 50 cents on average per parcel, but comes out to something like $2,500 per year. That we would be granting essentially this property owner in tax abatement if their property goes into OSL versus not OSL, right? And that's the the way the report was written, it was comparing largely OSAG and OSL, which is not the correct comparison. The correct comparison is what the assessor has currently said, which is it's not involved in OSAG, it must be kicked out of that. So it is just low density, residential is like the default here, and we're basically saying, do we want to take it from low density default to OSL? And cost the taxpayers of CMS that amount of money to do that. I'm on the fence about it. I don't love that it's been in there for 3 decades, basically getting a tax credit for, not the correct use. I don't particularly believe that the property is going to be developed and that the open space loss is going to occur. And as the photos show, we're not realistically getting a particularly significant, if at all, public access benefit, even though that technically will exist. So I'm on the fence about it, but I wanted to lay out kind of my thinking of what the decision we're making here is, in case that affects anyone else's thinking.
Commissioner Masseri.
And we've had the same conversation before, and I understand both sides of it. One thing I'd say though is if the logic is to not let it enroll because it's probably not gonna get developed because it's wet, then it's probably shouldn't be valued like it could be developed as well. Is been my thinking on some of these, and yet there's not that consideration. If it's just not in, it's gonna get valued on whatever the highest and best use technically could be on paper, but not in practicality. So.
Dominic raises an interesting question because I've had this direct discussion with a piece of property that I own related to the wetlands impacts on the property. And my direct experience with the assessor's offices is not a good understanding of the way wetlands impact property values and its ability to be developed. And I think that's a more accurate way of looking at how the property should be correctly valued.
Okay. I guess I had a question, because the photos didn't include the property that exists currently, which I guess as you said was a mobile home. Is it like a mobile home on wheels, or it's like a stationary, like on, more of a apartment?
Single wide manufactured home. Yeah, maybe it's double wide, forget. But yeah, it's been there for, I think, 20 years.
Okay. And that part of the property is on presumably more stable ground, like there's a part of the property that could, in theory, hold if they were to take that out and develop a, whatever. 7,000 square foot home, they could do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have trained eyes, but it looked like a man-made elevated little hill that the home sat on. It was elevated for sure out of the wet zone, but I don't think it could accommodate more.
Would it be on septic?
I'm not sure.
Cause they'd have to have an elevated hunk of ground if they're on septic.
Yeah, probably.
Look, I looked at the aerial photos. There's actually, looks like there's 2 home sites on the 5 acres.
Or maybe a shed or something.
Yeah, there is a shed.
Big shed.
This
Here.
shed is okay.
Yeah. There's a shed and there's the mobile home there.
And for the benefit of everybody else, that is one lot on the left.
Yeah, this is a little tiny lot here.
Wow. Sliver.
It's a sliver, and then here's another lot here, this
And
forest.
there's another lot directly behind it.
Yeah, and then these are different landowners here. It's 1, 2, 3 parcels totaling 5.11 acres.
Commissioner Masseri.
How does it work if they technically sold off one of those parcels or they've been consolidated? If they sold one off, how does that work with their open space designation?
That's a really good question. I would almost want to hear from Christine on that question. Subdivision, ability to subdivide.
So this is where we would ask for what we call a notice of continuance that explains what their intended use is. They would be made aware of the open space taxation agreement that is recorded against it. And if public access is a requirement of that, we also have a form that Alex has sent me that I get the title companies to get filled out and provide that back over. If the buyer does not want to continue in that program, then it has to be removed with the 7 years back taxes paid.
So the three properties are all getting enrolled, but if any one of them was sold off separately, they would just be addressed as an individual property.
Yep.
Commissioner Green.
And are we seeing 7 years of back taxes being paid on the difference between OSL and OSAG if we designate as OSL today?
No, it's the difference between full market and whatever classification it's in. So currently it's in OSAG. So if we removed it today, it would be the difference between full market and OSAG. And if it was, excuse me, if it was OSL, we would remove it. It would be the full market and the difference between OSL.
Yeah, I mean, it's been OSAG erroneously for 30 whatever years, but the last 7 of which you have jurisdiction. If we move it to OSL under the understanding that it should have been OSL for that whole time, you would not charge back taxes between the OSL difference and the OSAG.
No, it's each specific year. So for the years that it was OSL, it would be the difference between OSL and market value. And then for the years, if it's less than 7, it would be the difference between OSAG and market value.
Okay, so if we move it to OSL, you are charging back taxes on the difference between OSAG and market value for the last 7 years, regardless of what we do today.
Yep.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so they're getting hit with back taxes regardless.
Regardless. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, the
interesting.
open space is 7 years, no matter what.
Well, my question is, if they were to donate a conservation interest easement, would they be absolved of the back taxes?
No. No, conservation easements can have an impact on the full market value, but they don't impact, it doesn't impact the open space value whatsoever.
Commissioner Terry.
I just wanted to confirm I heard that right. So if we move them to OSL, they are going to be paying back taxes right now?
No. The only way they pay back taxes is if you don't approve, they're going to end up being removed. Or if, say you do approve and then 2 years down the road, they decide they don't want to be in the program anymore, then they would have to pay 7 years of back taxes.
So one of the ways of being shielded from back taxes is reclassifying, which is what's on the table.
We get it all the time.
Yeah. And maybe I didn't clarify this. OSAG, it has a higher tax benefit than OSL. So even if this landowner is approved, their taxes will go up. And
Regardless.
regardless, it's a matter if they go up to the OSL level or if they're gonna go up all the way to the residential highest and best use. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
That's what I was asking about the back taxes.
Yeah, it's a good question.
To me, it would make sense that they would pay the difference between OSL and OSAG for the last 7 years.
Yeah,
Maybe that's something that's on the table that we could
yeah.
make as part of our recommendation. I don't know. I'm not sure how far our recommendation can go.
So question for the assessor. How much was the wetlands impact factored into the assessed value of the property as it is now?
So I'm not an appraiser and I can't really speak to that, but I do have the main parcel with the house on it pulled up, and there is a 60% adjustment for the wet area. So it is being adjusted.
Oh,
That's a great question.
And yeah, because I haven't seen that on a property before. How does that show up on this assessor file?
I don't think it shows up on any public version of our real property search or anything. I had to pull up and look inside the land segment.
Okay, but in the worksheets, because I've seen worksheets on some properties and I don't remember ever seeing any sort of discount for wetlands before. Is that new, or
I don't know what worksheets you're referring to.
the worksheets that the assessor's office has when they're valuing properties?
Are you talking about historical worksheets? Because I don't think we fill out worksheets anymore for value.
Well, whatever the documentation that's produced. I mean, I've seen it as worksheets because I've seen it as a public records request. You follow me? I've seen the work product, but probably is a better way to put it.
Yeah, I don't. You would probably have to ask a member of management or appraisal team about where you can see that kind of thing, because I'm unaware of where you can
I
see it.
just never seen any appraisal that includes a factor for wetlands.
Oh, a lot of them do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Any additional questions for staff?
Are we ready to vote?
We're ready to vote. Eileen, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Greif,
No.
Hanson,
Yes.
Jefferson,
Yes.
Mosseri,
Yes.
Van Dalen,
Yes.
Brown,
No.
Barton,
Yes.
passes.
You have any unfinished business? Mr. Brown?
So, there's a rare point of order about procedure. And that is the closing of the meetings, but I believe that needs to occur according to Roberts, it needs to be before vote. Okay, right. So someone has to make a motion, has to be seconded, and go to close the meeting.
Commissioner Masseri?
It's not in our bylaws though, right? Or not our bylaw, what would we just approve last time, or,
We're not on Robert.
yeah, well, we defer to our rules first, then Roberts, right?
So if our rules have a different.
If our rules don't have that in there, or a different one in there,
If it has a different one, then we would use that over Roberts. If it does, if it's silent on it, then we would default to Roberts.
or the chair's discretion.
No. So it's either gonna be the rules, or in absence of definition, then you default to Roberts, or the American Association of Parliamentarians, whichever one of the rules is adopted. But the chair, otherwise the chair could just make up rules on the fly.
Sounds familiar?
So Brad, are you looking for a motion to adjourn?
No, I'm just saying that there's a procedural thing going forward. The motion to adjourn should be a motion. It shouldn't be a chair's decision, whoever the chair is. That's all.
Commissioner Hampton?
So moved. Let's go.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Meeting adjourned.
The gavel, all right.
Eileen, can you put a note to, you need to bring that up next year at our. Put something in there for that.
So the reason
More work for Eileen.
don't have to go through the.
Sorry about that.
Here's Julie.
Might as well laugh.
See you.
I get where, I get that,
But what the
it
ordinance
hasn't really been
says.
an issue.
Yeah, what,
So-
it's basically the exact language
I guess
in the
I-
short
I-
public benefit rating, at least 45 must be attained.
Well,
for recommended for approval.
Okay.
So you can,
Question.
so you cannot recommend approval if it's under 45.
Got
If
it.
it's over 45, you can recommend approval or not. You don't, if this one's 48, they could have said, we don't recommend.
You could say, it doesn't feel like, meets the standard, but.
Yeah, no, and I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Whatever, for whatever reason, or I think completely avoid it.